everything down, and then watched water double check it, tighten it some more, and it still leaks. So you add more tape, crank it down even harder, and somehow it gets worse. I've seen this happen to homeowners and even some handymen more times than I can count. And here's the thing. It's almost never the tape's fault. It's how the tape was applied. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the complete process of applying Teflon tape the right way. Your connection for a leak, cracking a fitting, and having to start all over again. Let's get into it. That affects almost every project you'll ever do. Chest connections, garden hoses, you name it. And the good news is, once you understand why the tape works and how to apply it correctly, you'll get leak-free connections every single time. So let's start by understanding exactly what this tape is and how it actually creates a seal. Now, Teflon tape, or PTFE tape, as it's technically called, that stands for polytetrafluoroethylene, but nobody says that. So we just call it Teflon tape or thread seal tape. And here's what a lot of people get wrong right from the start. Seal in a threaded pipe connection actually comes from the threads themselves. When you tighten a male fitting into a female fitting, those threads are designed to wedge together and create a mechanical seal. What the Teflon tape does is fill in the tiny microscopic gaps between those threads. See, no matter how well machined your fittings are, there are always tiny imperfections, little voids where water or gas can seep through. The tape fills those voids and also acts as a lubricant, which allows you to tighten the fitting a little bit further than you could without it. That extra bit of tightening is what really cinches the seal. So think of Teflon tape as the helper, not the hero. The threads do the heavy lifting. The tape just makes sure there are no gaps left behind. Understanding this will change how you approach every threaded connection. General purpose tape for water supply lines. It's typically about 3.5 mils thick. That's 3.5 thousandths of an inch, and it will be carrying water at normal household pressure. White tape is what you'll reach for probably 90% of the time. Then you've got pink tape, which is thicker, usually around 4 to 4.5 mils. Pink tape is also rated for water, but it's specifically designed for larger diameter pipes and fittings. White works just fine. Now here's where it gets important. Thicker than white tape, usually around 4 mils, and it's designed to handle natural gas and propane. The density is different. The way it seals is different. If you're connecting a gas line for a stove, a dryer, or oxygen lines in medical or welding applications, you probably won't need this for home projects. But I mention it so you know the full picture. So before you start any project, take 2 seconds to make sure you've got the right color tape for the job. Water connections get white or pink. Gas connections get yellow. It's simple, but I've seen people make this mistake and it's completely avoidable. Now that you've got the right tape, the next step is preparing the threads. And this is where a lot of people skip ahead and cause themselves problems. If you're working with a brand new fitting straight out of the package, you might think the threads are clean and ready to go, and sometimes they are. But it never hurts to take 30 seconds and wipe them down with a clean, dry rag. You're looking for any dust, debris, metal shavings from manufacturing, or packing grease that might be on there. Any of that stuff can prevent the tape from laying flat against the threads, and it can also contaminate your water supply. If you're working with a fitting that's been used, you can just work it into the threads. The goal is to get down to bare, clean threads with nothing left behind. I've seen people try to just wrap new tape right over old tape, and that's a recipe for leaks. The old tape is compressed, it's degraded, it's not going to seal properly, and the new tape can't bond to it. Take the extra minute to clean everything off. While you're cleaning, this is also a good time to inspect the threads for any damage. Look for cross-threading, replacing the fitting entirely. Trust me, a $2 fitting is a lot cheaper than water damage to your ceiling or walls. Once those threads are clean and you've confirmed they're in good shape, you're ready for the most important part, actually wrapping the tape. By the way, if you're finding this helpful so far, take a second to hit that subscribe button. Here's why this matters so much. When you thread that fitting into the female end, you're turning it clockwise to tighten it. If your tape is wrapped clockwise, the turning motion pulls the tape tighter against the threads, loose, wrinkled, and full of gaps. That's where your leaks come from. So let me walk you through exactly how to do this. Hold the fitting in your left hand with the threaded end pointing to your right, toward your dominant hand if you're right-handed. Now take the tape in your right hand and anchor the starting end against the threads with your thumb. Start wrapping away from yourself over the top of the fitting, which means the tape goes over the top and comes back underneath toward you. If you're looking at the fitting end on, you'll see you're wrapping clockwise. Keep your left hand steady and rotate the tape around the fitting rather than spinning the fitting itself. This gives you much better control. Now here's another tip. Start your first wrap on the second thread back from the end of the fitting, not right at the very tip. If you start right at the edge, the tape can bunch up or get pushed into the fitting when you make your connection, and that can contaminate your water line with bits of tape. Starting on the second thread keeps everything clean and gives the tape a proper surface to grab onto. Wrapping clockwise, but now the question is, how many times do you wrap? This is another to do it, and both cause problems. For most standard half-inch or 3/4-inch water supply connection, I usually do 4 to 5 wraps. That gives you enough material to fill all the thread gaps without building up so much bulk that it interferes with tightening. Here's how to think about it. After you wrap, you should still be able to see the outline of the threads through the tape. The tape should be thin and form-fitted to the thread profile, not thick and blobby. If you've got so much tape on there, you've overdone it. Too much tape creates its own problems. It can prevent the fitting from threading in far enough to create a proper mechanical seal. Remember what I said earlier, the threads themselves create the seal, and the tape just fills the gaps. If you've got a 1/4 inch of tape padding between the threads, they can't wedge together the way they're designed to. I've also seen too much tape squeeze out from the connection and leave strings of Teflon hanging inside the pipe. In a water supply line, that debris can travel downstream and clog aerators, valve one more. But if you're up past 6 or 7 wraps and still getting leaks, the problem isn't the amount of tape. It's either your technique and the right number of wraps, but if your tension is off, you'll still have problems. When you're wrapping the tape, you want to pull it snug, tight enough that it stretches slightly and conforms to the threads. but not so tight that it tears or becomes paper thin. The tape should feel like it's hugging the threads, not just laying on top of them. I pull with maybe 2 to 3 pounds of tension, if that makes sense. It's firm, but controlled. Here's a good test. As you wrap, the tape should stay in place on its own without wanting to spring back or unwind. If it's trying to unravel as you go, you're not pulling tight enough. And if the tape keeps breaking or tearing, you're pulling too hard. You'll get a feel for it after a few fittings. Some people try to stretch the tape as thin as possible, thinking that's better, but you can actually stretch it so thin that it loses its ability to fill gaps effectively. You want that slight stretch that makes the tape conform, but you still want adequate thickness for sealing. One technique I use is to keep my fingers close to the fitting as I wrap, maybe just an inch or two away from where the tape meets the threads. This gives me much better control over the tension than if I'm holding the tape roll a foot away. The closer your control point, the more consistent your wrap will be. And here's something else. Keep the tape flat as you wrap. Don't let wraps tear or cut the tape and press the loose end firmly against the fitting with your thumb. Give the whole wrapped area a final press all the way around to make sure everything is seated tightly against the threads. Now, you're ready to make your connection. This part feels straightforward, but there are still some things to keep in mind. Until it feels snug and won't turn anymore without force. You should get several full rotations by hand before it tightens up. If it feels like it's binding or getting hard to turn after just 1 or 2 rotations, stop. Back it out and check for cross-threading or debris. Once you're hand tight, you'll use a wrench to snug it up the rest of the way. How much tightening depends on the fitting, but for most household water supply connections, you're looking at about 1 to 2 additional turns past hand tight. With gas fittings, it's usually a little more, maybe 2 to 3 turns. The tape acts as a lubricant here, so the fitting should turn relatively smoothly. If you're really cranking on it and it won't budge, something's wrong. Don't force it. After tightening, it's time to test. For water connections, turn the supply back on slowly and watch the connection carefully. I usually let the water run for a full 2 to 3 minutes before I call it good. Some leaks don't show up immediately, especially slow seed where you can't see easily. A dry paper towel is great for this. Wipe it around the fitting. If it comes back wet at all, you've got a leak. For gas connections, the testing protocol is different. You'll use a gas leak detector solution, or you can make your own with dish soap and water mixed about 50-50. Brush it onto the connection and watch for bubbles. Any bubbles at all mean gas is escaping and the connection needs to be redone. Do not skip this step with gas. Let's talk about some common problems you might run into and how to solve them. First, you got a leak, even though you know you wrapped the tape correctly. Before you do anything else, try tightening the connection another quarter turn. Sometimes a fitting just needs a little more snugging. If that doesn't work, you'll need to disassemble, clean everything off, and rewrap. When you do, add 1 extra wrap and make sure you're really pressing that tape into the threads. Second, the tape keeps bunching up or shredding when you thread the fitting in. This almost always means you wrapped in the wrong direction. Counterclockwise wrapping causes the tape to fight against and won't thread in more than a turn or 2. You've either got too much tape built up, cross-threaded the fitting, or there's debris in the female threads. Back out the fitting and inspect both sides. Clean the female threads with a rag or brush and check that your tape isn't excessively thick. Fourth, you see white stringy material coming out, or there was too much tape that squeezed out during tightening. You'll need to clean your aerator and be more careful with tape placement next time. Fifth, the connection seems tight, but weeps very slowly over time. This often happens with older brass fittings or galvanized steel that has some corrosion or pitting on the threads. The tape alone can't fill those larger voids. In these cases, you might need to use pipe dope, also called pipe thread sealant, either instead of or in addition to the tape. Pipe dope is a paste that fills larger imperfections and can save connections that tape alone won't seal. 6. Dope together. Apply the tape first, then brush a thin layer of gas-rated pipe dope over the tape. This combination handles the imperfections in black iron threads much better than tape alone. The good news is, if you follow the steps we've covered, you should be able to avoid most of these issues entirely. Now, for that, you put too much torque on them. And once a plastic fitting cracks, it's garbage. Here's what I do on every connection, but I only tighten to hand tight, plus about a half turn with a wrench. That's it. Then I test for leaks. If I see any weeping, I'll add another quarter turn, but no more. What really makes the difference is applying the tape with a little extra stretch so it's very thin and conforms tightly. This lets the threads engage fully without building up bulk that makes you want to over-tighten. I also make sure to use white tape, not pink, because the thinner tape reduces the total buildup. Some pros even use a thread sealant designed specifically for plastic, like a PTFE paste that stays somewhat flexible. But for most homeowner projects, properly applied Teflon tape with restrained tightening will give you a perfect seal without risking thin tape, proper wrapping, and knowing when to stop tightening. That makes the difference. Applying Teflon tape for leak-free connections every single time. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you don't miss future videos. And if you've got any questions or tips of your own, drop them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.